Fellas, hello, how are we? Welcome back to another video. You are joining me today on an absolutely fucking beautiful day in Manchester. It may as well be Spain, it may as well be Barcelona, but without getting your phone nicked. Today, we're going to be going through how to get shredded, but without losing any muscle mass at all. It's safe to say that a lot of people, that's their main worry when it comes to a cut, is them ending up being a string bean and having nothing left in them. Now, this is something which I've experienced myself during a cut in the past, and I've learned from those mistakes. I did a cut back in 2019 when I was working at Alton Towers. I was doing like 10, 11-hour shifts. I remember doing like 6 or 7 days a week in a row, just constantly wake up, work, come back home. It was not nice at all. I remember we used to stand in the freezer, mate, because it was that hot during summer and they were drenched in that much sweat that the sweat on the shirt would start to freeze. And then I'd put it on next day. Oh, it was absolutely disgusting. It was grim. Now, I'm not going to just sit here and reel out scientific studies to you and how to lose fat optimally. This is going to be backed by not just science, but my own personal experience being a coach and competing myself in a bodybuilding show, where it's safe to say I got pretty fucking shredded. Now, we're gonna be going through 3 main aspects, as you would with pretty much any topic, subject when it comes to fitness, gym, bodybuilding stuff, right? So we're gonna be going through nutrition, training, and recovery, and what you can do within those 3 main aspects in order to lose nilch muscle at all. Oh, right, okay, so I've filmed this little section quite a few times, okay, and I tend to go down a rabbit hole because I've experienced a lot. I've coached a lot of people and I've done multiple cuts myself, where taking into account not just the science, but also my own experience, that combined is what makes up and forms my own opinions about rate of loss, about how to maintain muscle during a cut, which is why you get so many opinions and differing opinions when it comes to the fitness industry, because we've all got our own different experiences. But I'd like to think mine is actually based on some amount of science and fact, not just my own experiences and opinions. So when it comes to rate of loss, you've obviously got the scientific evidence, which states that the optimal rate of loss is between 0.5 to 1% of body weight per week. So for example, if you were a 100 kilo person, the optimal range would be considered to be between half a kilo to a kilo per week. Now, do I think you can exceed this? Yes, I do. And that's based on my own experience with not just myself, but also clients as well. You can actually start to push the envelope, especially when it comes to short-term fat loss. So for example, in my bodybuilding prep last year, I went through a prep which lasted for roughly about 16. By the time I'd got to the British finals and competed in those, I think I'd been in prep for about 18 weeks. So my first show was 14 weeks from the start of prep. The last one was about 4 weeks later, it's 18 weeks. So 8 of those initial 14 weeks, I was losing weight at an average rate of loss of about 1.5 kilos per week, which as a percentage, I'm not too sure exactly what that is, but it's definitely more than 1% per week, because my start weight in the beginning of prep was actually 90 kilos. So to be losing 1.5 kilos per week, you can see how that exceeds that 1% per body weight rate of loss. Now, there's multiple different things which go into it, which is why I'm going to cover obviously nutrition, we're going to cover calories, protein, carbohydrates, and the impact those can have on your ability to retain muscle. And we're also going to go through obviously your training, because that's a massive aspect, and also your recovery. It's hard to say one is more important than the other, because they're all just as important as each other. If one starts to, you start to slack on it and it starts to impact everything else, you're going down a slippery slope essentially. So if I start to veer off different paths, just bear with me. It is indeed relevant, and it will actually help you to form your own opinion, okay? So, rate of loss. Your calories are obviously what's going to determine the rate of loss which you go down. Now, I like to go aggressive. The reason I like to go aggressive is because when you're going through a diet, okay, at some point it's going to get painful. When I say painful, I don't mean actual pain, but you will be hungry a lot, you will be tired, you'll be fatigued. And so, in my opinion, the longer you drag that out for, you're just prolonging the pain. It's gonna hurt, you're gonna be hungry, no matter how slow or how fast you go about things. Now, if you can get away with going a little bit more aggressive and going faster, you get the pain over with quicker rather than just prolonging it. Do you know what I mean? So that's the approach which I like to take with a lot of clients. Unless it's someone who has never dieted before, what I'll do is start to build their habits up over time and get them to that point where they're able to lose weight at a faster rate. But for people who have been training for a while, who have been through cuts previously, and I know they can adhere to the plan, I will go fucking aggressive with them. So I've had clients lose, like for example, I had Jake who lost 22 kilos in the space of 22 weeks, which is obviously an average rate of loss of a kilo per week. And I've had clients lose more weight than the weeks they've been in the cut, if you get what I mean. So for example, with the winter shred and summer shred, I had quite a lot of those which had lost 12 kilos in the space of 8 weeks. And when you put their pictures side by side, and I'll put some on screen now, some examples, you can very clearly see that they either retain the muscle mass they've got, or they potentially even build some as well, because we optimize their training, their nutrition, their recovery, all those aspects, so that they're actually able to do both at the same time. So that's rate of loss out the way. You can indeed, in my opinion, push the envelope. Once you're getting towards 2% of body weight per week, that's where I'd cut it. I probably wouldn't go much more aggressive than that. And I definitely wouldn't do it for a long period of time. If you're gonna push that rate of loss higher than 1% per week, I probably wouldn't do it any longer than 8 to 10 weeks. To be honest, else you're really going to start to struggle with your training performance. Next, we're going to talk about protein intake. Now, again, when I'm setting people's protein, it is indeed based on science. So the optimal range has been shown to be actually much lower than what most bodybuilders will place their protein. I had some guy send me a message the other day saying that some fucking meathead in his gym had been saying to him that he needs to be consuming like 3.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, which worked out to be like 250 to 300 grams of protein per day, which you do not need to be consuming, okay? So with that optimal range being 1.6 to 2.2 grams, depending on the person, depending on how much muscle mass they've got, their diet already. So what I'll do with my clients is I'll run nutrition assessments to see what their protein intake is already sitting at. So if someone is consuming, you know, less than 100 grams of protein per day, I'm not gonna come in and put them on like 220, 230 grams of protein per day. It's just unrealistic. I would start them at the lower end, so 1.6 grams per kilogram. And the same with like muscle mass as well. If I've got someone who I can clearly see hasn't got a huge amount of muscle mass, I don't need to place them on the upper end of that range at up at 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, because it's just unnecessary, it's not needed. Whereas if I've got someone who I can clearly see has been training for a decent amount of time, they've got a decent amount of muscle mass, their recovery needs, their protein needs are going to be a little bit higher. So that's when I would then place them at the higher end. Also to do with body fat percentages as well, someone who's carrying a lot of body fat, obviously that's going to skew their body weight. Technically, if you were trying to obviously work out the exact protein needs of that person, it would be much easier to find out their body fat percentage and then work out their lean mass from that, and that then will determine how much muscle they've actually got. So it's essentially the same thing. You're going off body fat and you're going off muscle mass, but as long as you are within that 1.6 to 2.2 gram per kilogram of body weight per day, right, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna be absolutely fucking dandy, okay? Now, carbohydrate intake. This one is probably the most underlooked and the most underrated when it comes to retaining muscle mass. You'll get the fucking dickheads, the carnivore, Coach Carnivore Cam, for example, who insists on eating no carbs and just having protein. In my opinion, if you want to retain muscle, that's going to be dependent hugely on your ability to train hard. And what allows you to train hard, right? What do athletes who are running long distances, what do athletes like Usain Bolt, any athletes, right? What you will see from anyone at the Olympics performing this summer, forget all the controversy, the one thing you will see is carbohydrates, right? You will see Lucozade, Gatorades, Powerades, glucose and electrolyte pouches, carbs. Carbs are the fucking fuel for the engine, okay? So what you need to be making sure that you are doing is not only consuming a sufficient amount of carbs on a daily basis, but you are timing those carbs properly. So forget post-workout, right? Forget what your favorite bodybuilder has told you about needing to spike insulin and get fucking carbohydrates into the system to resynthesize glycogen as soon as possible, right? It's like turning up to a party early. Why do we need carbs 12 hours before you're going to go back into the gym and train again, okay? As long as that daily carbohydrate intake is sufficient and you're getting plenty in during your pre-workout meal and your intra-workout meal. Obviously, you're not going to sit there having a fucking Sunday roast intra-workout. What I mean by that is having some form of carbs during your session. So like, for example, sipping on a Lucozade, a Powerade, a Gatorade, or even just getting some cordial and putting 30 grams of cyclic dextrin into that. That's what I like to do. That gives you that constant flow of carbohydrates into your body as you are training, where usually towards the end of the session is where you'll start to see your performance dip. I've noticed there's a huge difference between when I have carbohydrates, just a constant steady flow, versus when I don't have that intra-workout carbohydrate powder. So pre-workout, what you're going to want to aim for is 1 gram per kilogram of body weight as a minimum. So if you weigh 100 kilos, you're going to aim for a minimum of 100 grams of carbohydrates in your pre-workout meal. Now, what could that consist of? In my opinion, that could consist of like a big bowl of oats with a banana, some dark chocolate to slow down the digestion a little bit, so you've got that steady flow of carbs in your system again, to aid towards the latter end of that session where your performance is going to taper off a little bit. Now, you could also go for something like Cocoa Pops if you are trying to slam a huge amount of carbs pre-workout, and then slow it down a little bit again with some fats, some dark chocolate on the side. It could be chicken and rice with a little bit of olive oil on top, or even just cooking the chicken with some olive oil. That'll help again. So it's basically high quality protein source, a fuck ton of carbs, and a little bit of fats and fiber, not too much, to help the steady, slow digestion of that. And trust me, that, once you get that pre-workout nutrition nailed, that's going to help with your performance during the gym massively. And we're going to talk about the importance of training in a second after I finish training legs, and why that isn't so important for retaining muscle. I don't believe we've done a shot out here yet, have we? I'm not going to show you actually, or even attempt to, because it's way too sunny, which is a rarity in Britain, but we're not going to complain. Now, a lot of people have this misconception that your training should change massively when you enter a deficit. It shouldn't change too much, to be honest. The only time it should change is towards the end a little bit, and I'll touch on that in a second. But with your training, you want to still train as if you are trying to build muscle, okay? So if you go into your sessions and you're in the mentality of, I'm weaker, I'm lighter, I'm smaller, I'm consuming less calories, so all of a sudden I need to drop the load, all of a sudden I'm going to start getting weaker and regressing in my sets, losing reps, losing weight. When it comes to the logbook, all of a sudden that's when you're going to start putting yourself at risk of losing muscle. Is it going to happen overnight because you dropped a fucking rep? No, it's not. And I would not advise either just chasing the logbook for the sake of it, because at the end of the day, some level of strength loss is normal during a deficit. You know, your internal leverages are going to change as you lose body fat, and you're just going to be nowhere near as stable, because at the end of the day, weight moves weight, which is why you see powerlifters, the strongest people in the world, they're heavy. They've got a lot of fucking weight behind them. So when it comes to that, you will lose a little bit of weight, but it's finding that balance between not chasing the logbook and also just not being a fucking pussyhole and just dropping the weight as soon as you feel a little bit lighter, you feel a little bit, you know, lethargic. I would advise using your warm-up sets. A lot of people do not utilize their warm-up sets anywhere near enough. They just rush through them. They don't really think about, okay, how am I feeling? How is the weight moving? If you're feeling good, you can take a progression. You don't need to just succumb to the deficit and be a fucking pussy hole, okay? So it's about finding that balance. In terms of like volume and exercise selection, they can change a little bit towards the back end of a cut. So with your volume, obviously your own recovery capacity, your ability to recover from your training sessions, as you get leaner and leaner, as your calories get lower and lower, as your cardio and steps get higher, and your sleep is likely going to get worse, you might need to bring your volume down a little bit. So for example, at the start of my bodybuilding prep last year, I'm pretty sure my quad volume was like 2 sets of a leg extension, it was 2 sets of a hack squat, 2 sets of a leg press, and 1 set of a split squat, I think. By the end of prep, I think I was doing 2 leg extension, 1 hack, and 1 leg press. And that was enough to provide the stimulus I needed to retain muscle, but not too much to the point where it would put me in a fucking pit of fatigue, where I was walking around sore for days and I was also walking around with my CNS, my own body, just being battered. So you can start to lower it as soon as you notice that you're struggling to recover. So if you're going into your next session, your next leg session, your legs aren't recovered, your joints are achy, your quads are still hurting, or you're just overall, you just feel fucked. If your sleep's nailed, the next thing I would look at is reducing volume, but that is like a last resort. As you get lighter, obviously, you're gonna want to pick more externally stabilized movements. So things like a flat dumbbell press, where you've got to stabilize those dumbbells and balance them. It's gonna be a little bit harder. You've got to flick the dumbbells up. That's gonna use energy. Swapping that for something like a flat machine press, or swapping something like, you know, if you're barbell squatting or you're Smith machine squatting and you have a hack squat or a pendulum available, that's going to be a decent swap. Now I'm going to go and crack on with, I'm actually creating a new logo for a project I've got coming very, very soon. So keep your eyes peeled in the next month or so, because it's going to be launching. So I'm going to go and create that on Photoshop. I just do all fucking jobs in MR coaching, do you know what I mean? Just wear all the fucking hats: editor, filmer, coach, everything. We're all sitting comfortable, we're chilling. Let's have a little chat about recovery, right? Now, when it comes to reducing muscle loss during a cut, sleep is literally the backbone of everything. It doesn't matter whether you're cutting, bulking, or even whether you go to the gym or not, right? If you don't even go to the gym and you actually want to function as a happy, loving human being who can actually think for themselves and their brain works well, and you can regulate your own emotions, you need to sleep. Sleep is so good for your brain, your gut, just everything. So you need to be prioritizing your sleep. A lot of people do not. Sleep is like, it's almost an afterthought, where it should be a priority every single night. Now, you don't need to set yourself like a strict bedtime, but I'll set so I know roughly what time I like waking up, anywhere between 8 and 9 o'clock. Which means for me to get in my 8 or 9 hours of sleep, I need to go to bed between 11 or 12, which is what I do, okay? Day in, day out, and that is a priority. Now, I understand that I am in a very fortunate position where I do not have to get up at 5, 6 a.m. like some people do and go to work, you know, people who have a 9 to 5, that sort of thing. I'm very, very lucky that I can wake up when I want, which makes things much easier for me. However, I have worked a normal job in the past, and even then, sleep was a priority for me. So rather than like staying up and watching an hour of Netflix, I would be like, right, okay, I've got to get up early again tomorrow. Future me is going to be pissed off tomorrow morning when I wake up and I'm knackered for watching that extra episode of Netflix, rather than just going to sleep now. So prioritize your sleep. It's going to help with cravings, it's going to help with hunger, it's going to help with recovery, your performance in the gym, like literally everything. You're going to feel so much better if you actually just sleep for long enough. And there's also studies that have shown they had a set of people which I think slept for 5 or 6 hours. They had a set of people who slept for, I don't know whether it was 7 or 8 or 8 or 9, but it was, you know, you can see the difference between how much they were sleeping. The group that slept for only 5 or 6 hours, despite every other factor being kept the same, so calories, size of the deficit, protein intake, exercise, etc., they lost 50% more muscle mass than the people who slept for 8 or 9 hours. You need to sleep, else you're putting yourself at a huge risk of losing muscle. And that is all for this video, fellas. Hopefully you found some value in this video, some actual actionable things which you can go away and implement if you are finishing your own cut, if you are doing a cut because it's come to the end of summer and you've maybe took things a little bit too far. Like I say, I have got something coming for all of you very, very soon, in the next month or so, which means you're going to be able to access my own knowledge, my own services at a little bit more of an affordable rate. So if that is something you are interested in, I will drop the link down below to join my email list, and I'll be updating everyone on my email list when that is going to be releasing. I'll also update you on my Instagram, so if you don't follow me on Instagram, go and follow me down below at Morg Rushton. And that is all. Any questions, drop them down in the comment section below. Like the video, click subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.